So here's the irony no one dares to say out loud. Singaporeans don't just dislike Chinese people, they dislike them because they understand them better than anyone else. You think racism is about ignorance? Nope. In Singapore, it's about familiarity. And let me warn you, it's not pretty. Because when you live in a country that's 75% Chinese, where the official festivals are basically imported wholesale from Guangdong, and where half your aunties sound like they stepped out of a Hong Kong drama, you don't get to exoticize the Chinese, you just get annoyed. Daily. And Singaporeans are world-class champions of passive-aggressive annoyance. Think about it. Most people meet Chinese tourists once a year on a bad vacation to Paris. They say, oh, they're loud, they cut queues, but maybe it's just a cultural misunderstanding. Singaporeans, they see this every day, at hawker centres, on the MRT, even in the voting booth. That's not a misunderstanding, that's Tuesday lunch. And this is where the real comedy begins. Singaporeans don't dislike Chinese people because of cultural gaps. They dislike them because of cultural overlap. They know every trick, every shortcut, every just add water lie, every table hogging tactic. And when you know someone that well, you stop forgiving. So buckle up, because over the next chapters, we're going to peel back the layers of this strange love-hate family drama. And by the end, you'll understand why Singaporeans treat mainland Chinese like that one relative you invite to the wedding out of obligation, but then hide the good whiskey from. Here's the thing. Most countries only deal with Chinese people in short, painful doses, like a tour bus arriving in Venice, unloading 60 people armed with selfie sticks, and then disappearing back into the fog. Annoying? Yes. Traumatizing? Maybe. But temporary. Singapore? Oh no, my friends. Singapore is living with the tour bus permanently parked outside your HDB block. Every day, every escalator, every food court. And let's be honest, Singaporeans don't even need subtitles anymore. They can tell the difference between a Beijing accent, a Shanghai one, and that glorious nasal Guangdong uncle shout before he even cuts the chicken rice queue. And this is where the irritation turns into full-blown comedy. Because Singaporeans don't get to hide behind the excuse of, oh, maybe that's just cultural differences. No, they know exactly what's happening. When a mainlander barges into a lift before anyone gets out, Singaporeans don't think, oh, he doesn't understand local norms. They think, yup, that's Uncle Zhang again, pretending physics doesn't apply to him. It's like living with a magician who only has one trick. You've seen the rabbit pulled out of the hat 1,000 times. It's no longer magic. It's just irritating. And in Singapore, the magic trick is queue cutting, loudspeaker level phone calls, and treating personal space like it's a Western conspiracy theory. But here's the real punchline. Singaporeans aren't innocent little angels either. They share plenty of the same DNA. The difference? Singaporeans dress it up in civilization and efficiency. Mainland Chinese just do it raw, unfiltered, and unapologetic. And nothing irritates Singaporeans more than seeing their own bad habits performed without shame. So chapter 1 sets the stage. Singaporeans dislike Chinese not out of racism, but out of recognition. It's not the foreigner problem, it's the too familiar mirror problem. And trust me, staring into that mirror every day makes even the cleanest city in Asia feel like a crowded wet market. If there's one thing that drives Singaporeans insane, it's this: the sacred queue. Singaporeans worship queues. They queue for bubble tea, they queue for iPhones, they queue just because other people are queuing. A queue in Singapore is like a holy shrine, orderly, quiet, efficient. Enter the mainland Chinese tourist. Suddenly, it's not a shrine, it's a war zone. The moment the queue forms, there's always that one auntie with the I just remembered my cousin is in front move, squeezing her way in like she's storming the beaches of Normandy. And behind her, 10 more relatives magically appearing, each one claiming family discount. Now, to the average tourist, this might look like rudeness. To Singaporeans, it looks like a masterclass in strategic queue infiltration. Because here's the truth. Mainland Chinese didn't invent corruption in government. They invented corruption at the hawker center line. Why bother waiting 20 minutes for chicken rice when you can just shove your child forward as a human battering ram? And of course, there's the volume. Singaporeans speak loudly only in one place, the kopitiam, when complaining about rising prices. Mainland Chinese? Every place is a kopitiam. Every phone call is broadcast at decibels that would make SAF fighter jets jealous. And the topics? Never private. It's money, property, government, loudly, publicly, with no shame. The funniest part? Singaporeans know these tricks too well because their parents and grandparents pulled them back in the 1960s. The only difference is that now Singaporeans wear Uniqlo polo shirts and feel civilized while watching tourists from Shandong barge through Orchard Road like it's a cattle drive. So yes, Chapter 2 is all about the art form of mainland manners, the constant, unapologetic, Olympic-level queue cutting, the phone calls that double as public service announcements, and the unshakable confidence that rules are for everyone else. And every time it happens, Singaporeans roll their eyes, sigh deeply, and say the line that defines this whole relationship. We know them too well. Let's talk about volume control, or rather, the complete absence of it. For mainland Chinese, there's no such thing as an indoor voice. Every MRT cabin, every shopping mall, every hawker center instantly transforms into Beijing's Tiananmen Square at rush hour. Now, to be fair, Singapore is not exactly the quietest place either. People argue at kopitiams, taxi uncles rant about politics, and aunties fight over discounted salmon at NTUC. But mainlanders? They elevate the chaos to stadium level. You can hear one man's business deal from 3 train cars away, complete with pricing, negotiations, and a postscript on why his cousin's wife is useless. And don't even get me started on the phone calls. Singaporeans use phones to talk to one person. Mainland Chinese use phones as public loudspeakers for the entire community. And here's the kicker. It's not just the volume, it's the absolute confidence. There is no shame, no hesitation, no thought of maybe others don't want to hear about my son's exam results. No. In fact, the louder they announce it, the more legitimate it becomes. If you've never been forced to hear the full details of a stranger's bowel problems on the MRT, then congratulations. You've never sat next to a mainland auntie on loudspeaker mode. Singaporeans hate this, but they also can't stop listening. It's like reality TV, but forced upon you at maximum decibels. And deep down, Singaporeans know exactly why it's so irritating, because their own grandparents used to do the exact same thing. The only difference? Back then, it was at wet markets, not in air-conditioned malls. So when mainlanders roll into Singapore and blast their personal lives across Orchard Road, Singaporeans don't think, that's foreign. They think, that's us, but without shame, without filters, and without aircon. And that mirror is brutal. Here's the twist nobody in Singapore likes to admit. All those things they complain about in mainland Chinese. They do them too. The only difference is, Singaporeans wrap it in packaging so shiny, you almost believe it's different. Almost. Take queue cutting. Singaporeans would never shove their way into a line directly. No, no, no. They'll reserve a table with a tissue packet, the legendary Shope system. Think about it. Singaporeans complain when a mainland auntie cuts into a hawker line, but then happily place a 0.02 tissue pack on a chair and call dibs on a seat for the next half hour. Same entitlement, different disguise, or volume. Singaporeans love mocking mainlanders for being loud. But have you ever heard a Singaporean mum scolding her child at a kopitiam? You can hear it across 3 housing blocks. The difference? Singaporeans say, we're not loud, we're just expressive. Mainland Chinese say the same thing, just in Mandarin at 10,000 decibels. And then there's the obsession with money. Mainland Chinese love flaunting wealth, designer logos the size of a small billboard, gold jewelry that can blind you in the sun. Singaporeans, they do the exact same flex, but with a minimalist twist. Instead of Gucci overload, it's subtle Rolexes, HDB bragging rights, and a kid in an international school. Still flexing, still showing off, just in a sleeker font. The truth is, Singaporeans aren't angry at Chinese habits because they're alien. They're angry because they recognize their own reflection. They hate queue cutting because they have trope culture. They hate noise because they know they shout too. They hate money flashing because, well, Singapore is literally a country built on showing off GDP numbers. So yes, Singaporeans dislike Chinese habits. Not because they're different, but because they're too damn familiar. It's like watching your own worst traits performed at maximum volume, with no aircon and no polite excuses. If there's one habit Singaporeans can spot a mile away, it's the mainland flex. You know the type. Designer logos plastered head to toe, handbags bigger than HDB apartments, and shoes so shiny you could use them as a traffic mirror. Mainland Chinese don't just buy luxury, they weaponize it. It's not "I bought a bag", it's "my bag is so big it can fit your entire CPF savings plan". And the logic is simple. If you're not blinding strangers on Orchard Road with your Louis Vuitton, then why even bother existing? The irony. Half the time those bags are fake. But it doesn't matter, because flexing is not about authenticity, it's about volume. Buy 10 fakes, wear them all at once, and suddenly you're the king of the kopitiam. Singaporeans roll their eyes at this, but deep down they understand. Because Singapore's entire national hobby is flexing too, just in spreadsheets. GDP, PISA test scores, airport rankings, mainland Chinese show off bags, Singapore shows off PowerPoint slides. Different format, same energy. But here's where it really stings. Mainland flexing is chaotic, obvious, and shameless. It's the noisy kind of wealth display. Singapore's flexing, on the other hand, is polished, silent, and socially acceptable. Driving a BMW to your HDB flat, subtle flex. Paying $1,000 for durians, cultural flex. Sending your kid to tuition 6 nights a week, academic flex. Singaporeans hate mainland flexing because it looks like their own, just without the polite filter. And then there's the cash splash mentality. Mainland tourists will buy 10 bottles of perfume at Changi duty free like they're stocking a small army. They'll clear out shelves at Watson's just to brag later. Singaporeans stand behind them, shaking their heads, but secretly thinking, damn, I wish I could drop money like that without blinking. So yes, mainlanders flex hard, in malls, in hotels, in taxis, in every possible place. But the Singaporean dislike isn't really about the flexing itself. It's about seeing their own insecurities, magnified, exaggerated, and paraded without shame. Here's the truth bomb. Singaporeans don't hate Chinese people because they're different. They dislike them because they're practically siblings. And anyone with siblings knows it's not the stranger who annoys you most. It's the brother who steals your clothes, eats your snacks, and still gets praised by your parents. Think about it. Both Singapore and China obsess over money. Both worship education like it's a second religion. Both treat rules as negotiable, as long as you're clever enough to bend them without getting caught. Sound familiar? Of course it does. It's the same DNA, just different packaging. China is the loud, chaotic older sibling who doesn't care what people think. Singapore is the polished younger sibling who insists on wearing a tie to dinner and correcting your grammar. The rivalry is pure family drama. Mainland Chinese look at Singaporeans and think, please, you're just us, but with better English and stricter fines. Meanwhile, Singaporeans look at Chinese tourists and think, God, that's what we would be without aircon, fines, and British colonial discipline. Yikes. And here's the best part. The more they dislike each other, the more obvious the resemblance becomes. Singapore hates the chaos of China, but secretly borrows its ambition. China mocks Singapore for being tiny, but secretly envies its order. They roll their eyes at each other like cousins forced to sit at the same table during Chinese New Year. At the end of the day, Singapore versus China isn't a clash of cultures, it's a family feud. And as with every family, the closer you are, the more you fight. Singaporeans know Chinese people too well. Too close, too familiar, too similar. That's why the annoyance runs so deep. It's not racism, it's sibling rivalry. And siblings never forgive, they just keep score. Picture this: Chinese New Year in Singapore, the one time of year where the family actually reunites. Singaporeans brace themselves as their mainland relatives fly in, armed with duty-free liquor, giant luggage, and stories about how property prices in Shanghai make Orchard Road look like a discount sale. At first, it looks fine. Smiles, oranges, polite greetings. But give it 10 minutes, and the chaos starts. The mainland cousin is already bragging. In China, we eat abalone like instant noodles. The Singaporean uncle fires back. Yeah, but at least our abalone isn't fake. Cue the laughter. Cue the awkward silence. Cue someone opening another bottle of tiger beer. Then comes the inevitable showdown. The mahjong table. If you've never seen a Singaporean auntie and a mainland cousin fight over $5 like it's the G7 summit, you haven't lived. Tiles flying, voices raised, accusations of cheating so loud the neighbors think a riot's breaking out. And through it all, one unspoken truth hovers in the room. They're not mad because they're different. They're mad because they're exactly the same kind of petty. By the end of the night, the Singaporeans are rolling their eyes, muttering, "Mainlanders, so uncivilized." Meanwhile, the mainlanders are laughing, saying, "Singaporeans, so uptight." And yet, come next year, they'll do it all over again. Because that's what families do: fight, complain, flex, repeat. That's the relationship in one dinner table. Singapore and China, cousins who share the same DNA, the same bad habits, the same obsession with face and fortune. And like every dysfunctional family gathering, the closer they sit, the louder the fight. So here's the uncomfortable truth. Singaporeans don't dislike Chinese people because they don't understand them. They dislike them because they understand them too well. The volume, the queue cutting, the money flexing, the shamelessness. It's not alien, it's familiar. Too familiar. This isn't East versus West. This isn't culture clash. This is family drama. Singaporeans and mainland Chinese are like siblings who grew up in the same chaotic household, but one decided to wear a school tie while the other showed up in slippers. Same DNA, different costume. And that's why the fight never ends. Because nothing triggers you more than seeing your worst habits reflected right back at you, just without the filter. So next time you see Singaporeans rolling their eyes at Chinese tourists, remember, it's not hatred, it's recognition. They're not disgusted by the stranger, they're disgusted by the mirror. But here's the real question. And this is where I want you to weigh in. Who's worse? The mainlanders who flex, shout, and cut queues without shame, or the Singaporeans who do the exact same things, but dress it up in efficiency and civility? Drop it in the comments. Because let's be honest, you already have a strong opinion, and I want to see how brutal you'll get.